The night was cold, the air heavy with silence, and the young man walked alone across the abandoned military outpost, his boots pressing against the dust of forgotten wars, his flashlight cutting through the shadows. He had been told never to come here, never to step inside the underground chambers, but his curiosity was stronger than fear, and something about this place called to him, like a voice without sound, like a whisper in the dark. Everyone in the colony spoke of the creature hidden beneath the earth, locked away by soldiers many years ago. A monster, they said, a beast too dangerous to be free. Children grew up hearing stories about her, stories meant to keep them away, stories that painted her as a nightmare with teeth and claws, but the young man had never believed those stories completely, because no one had ever actually seen her, no one except the guards who kept the secret. He reached a metal door, rusted but still locked, chains wrapping around it like snakes. The lock was old, the kind that cracked when forced, and with effort he managed to push his way inside. The air inside the chamber was colder, heavy with the smell of damp stone and something else, something like sorrow. Step by step, he walked down the narrow stairs, the walls closing in around him. The silence was deep, but sometimes he thought he heard a faint sound, not human, not animal, something in between. His heart beat fast, and for a moment he thought about turning back. But then he remembered why he came, because he wanted to know the truth, because he wanted to see with his own eyes what everyone else feared. At the end of the stairway stood another door, smaller but stronger, built with iron bars across its frame. He lifted his light, and through the gaps he saw movement. At first it was only a shadow, something shifting in the dark. But then she came forward slowly, and the breath caught in his throat. She was not what he expected. She was thin, too thin, her arms trembling as if her strength was nearly gone. Her skin pale like moonlight but marked with strange patterns that seemed to glow faintly. Her hair was long, tangled, falling across her face, and her eyes were bright, not with madness, but with something else, something sharp, something alive. The people had called her a monster, but standing there the young man did not see a monster. He saw a woman, an alien perhaps, but not a beast. She was caged like an animal, sitting on the stone floor, her hands bound in chains, and when the light touched her face she flinched, raising her arm to shield herself as though the brightness was too much. He felt his chest tighten. They had left her here in the dark, left her starving, left her forgotten. He looked at the corner of the room and saw a metal tray, empty except for crumbs, scraps that no living being should eat. His anger rose, but fear still crawled inside him. Because what if the others were right? What if she truly was dangerous? Then she looked at him. Not like a predator, not like a creature ready to strike, but like someone who had been waiting, someone who had lost hope and suddenly saw a new chance. Her eyes locked onto his, and in that instant he felt something he could not explain. An understanding. A connection. His fingers tightened on the flashlight. His breathing grew heavy. He wanted to speak, but no words came. She moved closer to the bars, her steps weak, unsteady, but her eyes never leaving his. The chains around her ankles clinked softly, echoing in the chamber. The sound of her prison, he whispered to himself. This is no monster. And yet the world above had treated her as one, had starved her, mocked her, locked her away as if her life had no meaning. He thought of the soldiers who laughed when they told the stories, how they boasted that they had captured a demon. He thought of the elders who warned the children never to come near this place, saying that if the creature escaped, everyone would die. But now, standing before her, seeing the weakness in her body, the pain in her eyes, he realized the stories were lies, or maybe the lies had grown so strong that even the people who told them no longer knew the truth. She reached out her hand, trembling, stopping just short of the bars. Her fingers were thin, her nails broken, but her gesture was not of attack, it was of longing. She wanted to touch, to feel, to connect. The young man hesitated, his hand hovering in the air. One step closer and he could meet her touch. One step closer and he could break every rule he had been told. His heart raced, torn between fear and compassion. Then in the silence, her lips moved. No sound came, or maybe it was too soft to hear, but he understood anyway. She was asking. Not for freedom, not for power, but for food, for kindness. For something so small and yet so great. And in that moment, he knew his life was about to change forever. Because he was the first human to look at her and see not a monster, not a beast but a woman, a soul trapped in chains. and deep inside he knew he could not walk away. The discovery was not just hers, it was his. The young man could not sleep that night. His mind replayed what he had seen in the underground chamber. The pale woman with glowing eyes, the chains on her arms, the hunger in her gaze. Every story he had been told since childhood now felt like smoke, easy to scatter, easy to see through. She was not the monster they had promised. She was something else, something forgotten, something broken, something waiting. He lay awake on his thin bed staring at the cracked ceiling. The image of her hand reaching through the bars stayed with him. That gesture was not of hatred, not of rage. It was of need. And her lips, moving without sound, begging not for power but for food. Those lips haunted him more than any nightmare. By dawn, he had made a choice. When the world above was still quiet, when most people were busy with their daily routines, he slipped away. In his pack he carried bread, soft and fresh, and a flask of clean water. It felt strange to think that something so small, something he himself often took for granted, could mean everything to her. The path back to the chamber felt shorter this time, as if his heart pulled him forward. The air was cold again, the stairs as narrow and damp as before, but his fear had changed. The first time he was afraid of her. Now he was afraid for her. At the bottom, the door creaked as he pushed it open. His flashlight cut across the darkness, and again he saw her. She was sitting against the wall, her knees pulled to her chest, her chains coiled like dead snakes on the floor. Her head lifted slowly when the light touched her, and her glowing eyes blinked against the brightness. She saw him. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The silence stretched between them like a fragile thread. Then he stepped forward carefully, each footstep echoing. He opened his pack, pulled out the bread, and held it where she could see. Her eyes widened, not with wild hunger, but with shock. Her lips parted as if she could not believe what she was seeing. She crawled closer, her chains dragging behind her, and when she reached the bars, her thin fingers trembled in the air, not daring to snatch, not daring to demand. Slowly, he pushed the bread through the gap. For a moment, she only stared at it. Then, with both hands, she took it as if it were a jewel, as if it were the most precious thing in the universe. She did not tear it apart like an animal. She held it gently, brought it to her lips, and bit softly. The young man watched as she chewed, her face changing from sorrow to relief. It was as if life returned to her with each bite. She closed her eyes and a sound escaped her, a soft sound like a sigh, almost like gratitude. He set the flask of water next to the bars. She reached again, her hand brushing against his fingers for the first time. Her skin was cool, fragile, but alive. She drank carefully, not wasting a drop, and when she was done, she pressed her forehead against the iron bars, breathing slowly, as though she had forgotten what it meant to feel full. The young man's chest grew heavy. He had done something forbidden, something dangerous, but he did not regret it. For the first time, he felt her trust. She lifted her head and looked at him. This time, her lips moved again, but now he heard a sound. Weak, broken, but real. A single word, a name perhaps, though not in his language. Her voice was soft, almost musical, carrying sadness and hope together. He did not understand the word, but he understood the meaning. She was speaking to him, trying to reach him, trying to show she was more than what the stories claimed. He whispered, "I hear you." His own voice shook, but his eyes did not leave hers. Her gaze softened. Then, to his surprise, she smiled. Not a wide smile, not a smile of joy, but a faint curve of the lips that told him she felt something she had not felt in years. Kindness. And then it happened. After finishing the last piece of bread, she reached through the bars once more, but this time she did not reach for food. She touched his hand. Her fingers were cold but steady, resting lightly on his skin. He froze, his breath caught, but he did not pull away. Her touch was not violent. It was gentle, like a whisper, like a thank you without words. He felt warmth spread through him, though her hand was cold. His heart raced, not from fear but from something new, something he could not explain. The moment lasted only seconds before she pulled back, retreating into the shadows of her cell. But those seconds changed everything. He looked down at his empty pack, then back at her. She sat with her hands folded, her glowing eyes still fixed on him, not with hunger now, but with something deeper, trust. The young man turned and left the chamber, his mind burning with questions. Who was she really? Why had they locked her away? What crime could she have committed to deserve chains and starvation? But even with no answers, he knew one thing for certain. The bond between them had begun. The first contact had been made, not with weapons, not with fear, but with food and kindness, and deep inside, he felt it was only the beginning of something much greater, something that would shake the colony, the soldiers, and maybe even the stars themselves. The young man woke the next day with a restless heart. He had crossed a line drawn by soldiers, by elders, by every story told in whispers around the fire. He had fed the so-called monster. He had touched her hand. He had broken a rule that no one dared to break. Yet as he sat on his bed staring at his empty hands, he did not feel regret. He felt something else, an ache, a pull, a voice deep inside telling him he could not stop now. He had seen her smile, faint but real, and that smile followed him like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. All day, he tried to act normal. He worked where he was expected to work. He answered when people spoke to him. But every moment his mind drifted back underground to the pale woman with glowing eyes. He wondered if she was waiting for him. He wondered if she still had strength after the little food he gave. And most of all, he wondered how long she could survive if he did nothing. That night, when the sky turned black and the colony grew quiet, he made his choice. He packed more food this time, not just bread but fruit and more water. He knew if he was caught, punishment would be harsh, maybe death. But he also knew he could not watch her starve while he walked free above the earth. The path to the chamber felt darker that night. Every sound made him stop. The crunch of gravel beneath his boots, the rustle of wind through broken walls, the far-off echo of guards changing shifts. It all pressed against him like warning voices. But he pressed on, deeper into the forbidden ground until the cold stone stairs swallowed him once more. When he opened the door, she was there, waiting. This time she did not sit far away. She was close to the bars, her glowing eyes fixed on the entrance. As his light fell upon her, she stood weakly as if pulled by hope. He froze at the sight. She had been waiting for him, believing he would return. He knelt down, opening his pack, and pushed food through the bars. Her trembling hands accepted it, but this time she did not eat right away. She looked at him first, her eyes searching, asking if it was truly for her. When he nodded, she brought the fruit to her lips. The sweetness must have been a shock to her tongue because a soft sound escaped her, half sigh, half cry. She ate slowly, savoring each bite. And with every piece she finished, she grew steadier, her movements less fragile. The young man watched, his chest heavy with both relief and guilt. Relief that she was alive, guilt that his people had left her in this state. After the food was gone, she placed her hand against the bars, the same as before. Only this time her touch was stronger. He hesitated, then lifted his hand until his palm pressed against hers, iron bars between them. Their fingers aligned, separated by cold metal, but connected all the same, the young man whispered, "You are not a monster." She tilted her head, as if she did not understand the words, but she felt the meaning. Her lips curved again, the faintest smile, and then she leaned forward. Slowly, carefully, she pressed her forehead against the bars so close that he could feel the warmth of her breath. It was a moment of trust, a moment that broke every story, every warning, every rule. But rules have guards. A sound echoed down the stairwell, the creak of boots on stone. His blood froze. Someone was coming. Quickly, he pulled back, grabbing his pack, and stepped into the shadows. The alien woman retreated too, falling into the darkness of her cage. The door at the top of the stairs opened with a groan, and a soldier's voice called out, harsh and bored. "Still alive down there, monster?" The guard mocked. His footsteps clanged closer. The young man held his breath, pressing against the wall, his heart hammering. The soldier reached the cell, peered through the bars, and laughed. "Still hungry? Good. Maybe hunger will keep you quiet." He tossed something onto the floor, a crust of stale bread, hard as stone, then turned and left, muttering about wasted duties. The young man did not move until the footsteps faded away. Only then did he step back into the light, his breath shaking. The alien woman had not touched the soldier's bread. She looked at it, then at him, as if to say she would not eat cruelty, only kindness. He understood. And in that moment his decision hardened. He was not just breaking rules by feeding her. He was breaking chains of lies. He leaned close to the bars, whispering so only she could hear. I will come back. I will help you. No matter the risk. Her glowing eyes softened. For the first time, she spoke clearly, a single word in her strange language. He did not know what it meant, but he knew what it carried. Trust. The young man left the chamber that night with fire in his chest. The rule had been broken, the line crossed. There was no turning back now, because the monster they feared was no monster at all. And soon, the whole colony would learn the truth. The nights grew colder, but the young man's secret path to the underground chamber grew warmer in his heart. Each step he took into the darkness no longer felt heavy with fear but alive with purpose. He had broken the rule once, then twice, and now it was no longer a question of fear. It was a habit, a duty, almost a promise. Every evening, when the colony slept, he carried food hidden beneath his cloak, water wrapped in cloth to stop the sound of sloshing. And every evening she was waiting. The alien woman, weak but glowing, fragile yet unbroken, would rise at the sound of the door creaking open. Her eyes always found him first. Those glowing orbs, once filled with despair, now carried a flicker of hope, small but real, and with each visit that hope grew brighter. On this night he carried not just bread and fruit, but something sweeter, a piece of honey cake he had stolen from the kitchen. He knew if anyone discovered his theft he would be punished, but the thought of her tasting something sweet after years of bitterness gave him courage. When he entered, her lips parted in surprise. She moved closer, her chains dragging softly, and her eyes widened at the sight of the golden cake in his hand. Carefully he passed it through the bars. She held it gently, as if afraid it might vanish like a dream. The first bite made her close her eyes, and a small sound escaped her throat. A sound of joy, soft and trembling, a sound that pierced his heart. He had never heard her laugh, never heard her sing, but in that sound of sweetness he heard life itself returning. She finished the cake slowly, piece by piece, and when it was gone, she did something he did not expect. She leaned close, her fingers gripping the bars, her face inches from his. Her glowing eyes shimmered in the dim light, reflecting something he had not seen before: gratitude. For a long moment they stayed like that, eyes locked, silence thick with meaning. He felt his pulse quicken, his breath shorten. He was not afraid, but he was unprepared. Then she moved. Through the bars, her hand touched his, firmer than before, no longer trembling. She leaned closer, and before he could speak, she pressed her lips gently against his hand. The young man froze. The cold of her skin mixed with the warmth of her breath. The kiss was not fierce, not desperate. It was soft, deliberate, full of meaning. A thank you, a blessing, a vow. His heart pounded so loudly he thought the guards above might hear it. He wanted to pull away, but he couldn't. He wanted to step closer, but the bars held him back. All he could do was stand there, caught between fear and wonder as her lips lingered against his skin. When she pulled back, her glowing eyes did not leave his. She tilted her head slightly as if trying to read his soul. Then in her soft, broken voice, she spoke again. He still did not know the language, but he felt it in his bones. It was a word of thanks, he whispered back, his voice shaking. You don't have to thank me, but she did. And she showed it not with words, but with another kiss, this time on his cheek. She leaned through the gap between the bars, her chain straining, her face brushing his skin. The touch was feather light, but it burned into him like fire. The young man stumbled back, breathless. His hand went to his cheek as if to hold the warmth there forever. His heart raced, his thoughts tangled. What had just happened? A kiss from the one everyone called a monster. A kiss that felt more human than anything he had ever known. She watched him carefully as if afraid she had done wrong. But when he met her gaze again, he did not see danger. He saw tenderness. He saw a soul reaching for another soul. He stepped forward again, his voice low. I will not leave you here forever. The words left his mouth before he could stop them. But he meant them. With every visit, with every shared moment, he grew less afraid of the world's rules and more afraid of what would happen if he abandoned her. She did not answer in words, but her smile, faint, fragile, but real, was enough. The chamber seemed smaller that night, as if the walls had moved closer. He could hear his own heartbeat echo against the stone. For the first time, he realized how dangerous this bond had become. Not dangerous because of her, but because of what others would do if they discovered it. And yet he could not stop. He left the chamber that night with trembling hands and fire in his chest. Every step up the stairs, he touched his cheek where her lips had pressed. The kiss was a secret no one could take from him, a secret that burned brighter than fear. Above ground, the world was silent, the colony asleep. But inside him, a storm had begun. He had crossed another line, a deeper line. Feeding her had been rebellion. Touching her hand had been betrayal. But this was something greater. He was no longer just breaking rules. He was falling into something forbidden, something dangerous, something undeniable. The woman they called a monster had kissed him, and nothing in his life would ever be the same again. The young man's life no longer felt the same. Days passed like shadows, ordinary on the outside, but inside his chest burned the secret he carried. No one in the colony knew what he had done. No one knew he had fed the prisoner, spoken with her, touched her hand, and even felt the brush of her lips on his skin. But secrets have weight, and the heavier they grow, the harder they are to hide. He avoided the eyes of his neighbors. He answered questions with short words, forcing himself to smile when asked why he seemed distracted. His hand shook when elders spoke about the monster under the ground, warning the children never to go near her. He wanted to shout at them, to tell them the truth, but the truth was dangerous. The truth could destroy him. Each night he returned to her, and each night she grew stronger. Food gave her strength, water gave her voice, but it was trust that gave her life. She began to speak more, though her language was strange. He could not understand the words, but he understood the way she used them. The tone of gratitude, the rise of hope, the softness when she spoke to him. He answered with his own words, knowing she could not understand, but their voices created a bridge anyway. One evening, after she ate, she lifted her wrist and held it out through the bars. The skin there was marked with deep scars, thick and cruel. Chains had rubbed against her for years, cutting and burning until the wounds became part of her body. She pointed to the scars, then to the door, then back to him, her glowing eyes filled with pain, not just from the marks but from memory. She had been captured, hurt, treated like an animal. She wanted him to know. The young man's chest grew heavy. He reached through the bars, touching her wrist gently. His fingers brushed the scars, and she did not pull away. She only watched him, her gaze deep and unblinking. "They hurt you," he whispered, though she could not know the words. "They made you suffer." She nodded, slow and solemn. Then she placed her other hand against her chest and whispered a word. She repeated it twice, her voice steady. A name, her name. He froze. Until that moment, she had been a mystery, a prisoner, a monster to everyone else. But now she was something more. She was a person with a name carried on her lips like a prayer. He repeated the sound as best as he could. She smiled, faint but real, and nodded. For the first time, he felt he truly knew her. But their moment did not last. From above, a sharp noise echoed down the stairwell, the voices of guards. The young man quickly stepped back, his heart pounding. He grabbed his pack and hid in the shadows as footsteps clanged against the stairs. 2 soldiers entered the chamber. Their laughter was cruel, their eyes cold. One kicked the bars with his boot. "Still alive, beast," he sneered. "Good. The commanders want you weak, not dead." The other guard dropped a bucket of filthy water near her feet. "Drink this, monster. It's all you deserve." The alien woman did not move. She kept her glowing eyes fixed on the floor, her chains rattling softly as she remained still. But the young man, hidden in the dark, saw her hands tighten, saw her jaw clench. She was not broken, no matter how they tried. The soldiers muttered a few more insults before leaving, their boots echoing as they climbed away. When silence returned, the woman lifted her head. Her glowing eyes burned with something new, pain mixed with anger. She pushed the dirty water aside and whispered her name again, louder this time, as if demanding he remember it, as if demanding someone in this world speak it with respect. The young man stepped forward again, trembling, his fists clenched. He whispered her name back to her, steady and sure. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, tears slid down her pale face. He wanted to break the bars, to tear the chains from her wrists, to scream at the world for what they had done. But all he could do was reach through the iron and place his hand on hers. She gripped it tightly, her strength returning with every passing night. And in that moment, the truth struck him like a blade. She was no monster. She never had been. The real monsters were above. The soldiers, the leaders, the ones who chained her and starved her. The ones who told lies so their cruelty would not be questioned. The young man felt his chest burn with anger and resolve. He had thought feeding her was dangerous. He had thought touching her was rebellion, but now he understood something deeper. This was no longer just about kindness. This was about justice, about truth, about freeing someone who had been silenced for too long. Her secret was now his. Her story was now his, and he knew he could not keep it hidden forever, because secrets, no matter how deep underground, always rise to the surface. The young man no longer saw the underground chamber as just a prison. He saw it as a battlefield, one where silence and cruelty had ruled for too long. Each time he returned, the woman grew stronger, not only from food and water but from hope. And each time she whispered her name, it became a vow in his heart. She was not a beast, not a monster, but someone who deserved freedom, yet freedom had a cost. The colony was full of eyes and the guards were cruel. Already whispers moved through the town. Someone was sneaking near the old prison. Someone was breaking rules. The young man felt those whispers following him like shadows. One wrong step, one careless word, and they would drag him before the commanders. But he did not care anymore. The time for fear was over. One night, as the pale woman finished eating, he leaned close to the bars and whispered words she could not understand. His voice was low, almost trembling, but full of fire. "I will get you out." She tilted her head, her glowing eyes narrowing, as if she understood the shape of his words even without knowing their meaning. Then she pressed her chained wrists against the bars, the iron biting into her skin. She wanted him to see the chains, to understand the prison fully. He reached out, touching the metal links. They were old, rusted, but strong. Breaking them would not be easy. But as his fingers closed around the iron, an idea began to form. For days he watched the guards in secret. He learned their routine, their timing, the way they spoke with boredom as they descended the stairs, the way they laughed as they mocked her. He saw how one carried the keys on his belt carelessly, as if no one would dare touch them. The young man's heart raced with each discovery. He was no soldier, no thief, just an ordinary person, but desperation made him brave. He planned in silence. At night, when the stars hid behind clouds, he marked the hours. When the guards grew lazy, when the hallways above were empty, when the world slept deepest, those were the moments he would move. Each visit, he whispered his plan to her in broken fragments. She did not understand his language, but she understood his eyes, his hands, the fire in his voice. When he pointed to her chains, then to his own chest, then to the stairs, she nodded. Her trust was absolute. And that trust terrified him. Because if he failed, she would suffer even more. If he was caught, they would kill him, and perhaps kill her too, to erase the shame of their failure. But failure was no longer an option. On the night before his attempt, he brought her more food than usual. She ate quietly, watching him. He could see in her glowing eyes that she felt the weight of what was coming. She reached through the bars, pressing her palm against his cheek. Her touch was soft, trembling, but steady enough to tell him. She believed. He pressed his own hand over hers, closing his eyes for a moment. "Tomorrow," he whispered. When he left that night, his steps were heavy, but his resolve was light. The plan burned inside him, shaping his every breath. The day that followed was the longest of his life. He worked among his people, hiding his trembling hands, forcing himself to speak when spoken to. But every sound felt sharp, every glance felt dangerous. By sunset, sweat clung to his skin, though the air was cool, and then the night came. He waited until the guards grew drunk with laziness, their laughter echoing through the colony as they played dice in the mess hall. He waited until the last torch in the hallway flickered low. Then he moved, silent as shadow, his heart pounding like war drums. The underground chamber greeted him with its familiar cold. She was there, standing near the bars, her chains glinting faintly in the light. Her eyes widened as she saw him approach, not with surprise but with readiness. She knew. She was waiting. He pressed a finger to his lips, signaling silence. Then he pulled a piece of metal from his cloak, a tool stolen from the workshop. His hand shook as he reached for the lock on the bars. The scrape of metal against metal filled the air, louder than thunder in his ears. Minutes dragged like hours. Sweat slid down his face. But then, click. The lock gave way. Her eyes widened, her breath catching. She stepped back as he pushed the heavy bars open. The sound was soft, but to him it roared like an alarm. He knelt by her chains, his fingers fumbling with the rusted locks. She placed her hands on his shoulders, steadying him, whispering words in her alien tongue. Though he did not understand, he felt the meaning: courage. The first shackle snapped open, then the second. The chains clattered to the floor. For the first time in years, her wrists were free. She lifted her hands slowly, staring at them as if they belonged to someone else. Then she looked at him. Her lips parted, but no words came, only tears. The young man grabbed her hand. "We must go now," she nodded. Together they stepped toward the stairs. Every sound seemed louder now, their footsteps, their breathing, the rustle of her chains dragging as she walked. But beyond fear, beyond danger, there was hope. For the first time, she was no longer a prisoner. For the first time, they walked side by side, bound not by iron but by trust. The escape had begun. The stairs seemed endless. Each step upward carried the weight of danger, the weight of years stolen from her, the weight of his decision that could never be undone. The young man gripped the alien woman's hand tightly, his heart pounding so loudly he feared it would betray them to the guards above. Her steps were slow at first, unsteady after so many years in chains, but her grip was strong. Though her body trembled, her eyes glowed brighter than ever. For the first time, she was moving toward freedom, not away from it. At the top of the stairwell, the heavy wooden door loomed like a barrier between two worlds, the world of shadows and the world of open sky. He pressed his ear against it, listening. Silence, no voices, no footsteps. His hand trembled as he pushed, the door creaking open. But fate is never silent for long. The hallway beyond glowed faintly with torchlight, and standing there were two guards. Their laughter died in their throats the instant they saw her stepping out, her pale figure framed by darkness, her chains broken. "Stop," one shouted, fumbling for his weapon. The young man pushed her behind him. His voice shook, but it rang with fire. "She is not your monster." The guards rushed forward. The first swung his blade, but before it struck, the air shimmered. The alien woman lifted her hand and a strange light burst from her palm. It was not fire, not lightning, but something alive, something that hummed with power. The blade never reached him. Instead, the guard was thrown back, crashing into the stone wall with a cry of shock. The second guard froze, terror in his eyes. He dropped his weapon and fled down the hall, screaming for reinforcements. The young man turned to her, stunned. She was breathing hard, her body still weak, but her eyes burned with strength. He realized then. She had always possessed power, but the chains, the hunger, the cruelty had kept it locked inside. Now freed, even in her weakened state, she could fight. "We must move," he whispered. Together they ran through the hallways, the sound of alarms soon filling the air. Torches flared as soldiers rushed from their posts. Shouts echoed, boots thundered. At the edge of the colony walls, they were cornered. Dozens of soldiers blocked their path, their weapons drawn. Behind them, more soldiers poured in, surrounding the pair like a tightening net. The commander stepped forward, his voice sharp. "You fool! Do you know what you've done? That creature is dangerous. She will destroy us all." The young man's voice cracked, but he shouted back, "She is not a creature. She is more human than any of you." The soldiers laughed bitterly, their weapons raised. But before they could strike, the alien woman stepped forward. Her chains still hung from her wrists like broken wings, clattering as she raised her arms. Her glowing eyes blazed brighter than the torches, and the air itself seemed to tremble. The soldiers hesitated. Fear spread across their faces. They had mocked her in chains, but now, unbound, she was something greater than they could imagine. The commander shouted, "Kill her!" But the young man moved first. He spread his arms wide, standing in front of her. His body shook, his voice roared, "If you kill her, you kill me too." The soldiers froze. In that instant, they saw not a monster and a human, but two beings side by side. One who had been chained, one who had chosen to break the chains. Their bond shone brighter than weapons, brighter than fear. The alien woman placed her hand gently on his shoulder. Then she stepped forward, her voice rising in a language none of them knew. The ground beneath them trembled, the air rippled with energy. The soldiers stumbled back, their courage breaking. And then, with one last burst of power, she created a shield of light. It spread around her and the young man like a dome, shimmering, untouchable. The soldiers' weapons struck against it but could not pierce it. Hand in hand, they stepped through the chaos, moving toward the open gate. Soldiers shouted, but none dared to stand in their way now. Fear held them back, but also something else, shame. They had called her a monster, but in that moment she looked more like a queen than a beast. Beyond the colony walls, the night stretched wide, stars glittering across the sky. For the first time in years, she breathed free air. She tilted her head back, her lips parting in awe, and tears shimmered in her glowing eyes. The young man looked at her, his chest heavy but proud. He whispered, "You're free now." She turned to him, her lips curving into the faintest smile. Then she spoke, her voice clear, her name on her lips again, but this time when she said it, she pointed to him as well. As if to say their stories were now bound together, they walked into the night, leaving the shouts of soldiers behind. The young man knew the colony would call him a traitor, that he could never return. But as he felt her hand in his, as he saw her glowing eyes shining with gratitude and strength, he knew he had chosen the path of truth. The world above had called her a monster. But that night, humanity was saved by kindness, by courage, and by one man who dared to believe in her.